This is today's economic update for our Patreon community. This is Richard Wolff for Democracy at Work. My task today is to directly undercut, refute, undermine the claim by President Trump and the Republican Party, endorsed by many media and liberal folks on the Democratic side and beyond as well, that we are somehow in a quote-unquote great economy. Nothing is further from the truth. And those of you who know how I present economics know that I am not given to strong, sweeping statements. This is an exception demanded by the apparent consensus that whatever else one has to criticize about conditions today, the economy is not among those items. That's wrong. Let me explain why. And a metaphor will help us. If you are having severe pains or feeling ill and you go to a doctor, you expect the doctor, if he's going to assess or she's going to assess your overall physical health, that he or she will use the available statistical data, measurements one can make. Such a doctor would test your blood with blood tests, do x-rays, perhaps an MRI, a CAT scan, of course take your temperature and look at you and discuss with you your life patterns. Putting all of that together could then enable an assessment. In medical cases, it's called a diagnosis. Suppose, however, the doctor you went to see was either incompetent or perhaps owned stock in a thermometer company, and all he or she did was pop a thermometer under your tongue, take your temperature, notice it was 98.6, and clap you on the back and tell you your health is great. My hope is, and my advice is, find another doctor. Why? It's simple. You cannot assess the health of a human being by one or two or three pieces of information. There's no need to do that. There's no justification for doing that. It makes one suspicious about what kind of training or ulterior motives such a doctor might have, because it is so incompetent and inadequate. Well, the same applies to the diagnosis of an economy. We have at our disposal in the economics profession, whether it be academic, governmental, enterprises too have economists. None of them works this way, or he or she would lose their job, and rightly so. Here's what we have. We look at the level of unemployment. That's exactly like popping a thermometer under your tongue. It gives some information, but far from all of it. We look at other things, the rate of growth of your economy, the level of debts carried by the government, by business, by people, the quality of the jobs in terms of the incomes you earn, the wages and salaries, the security of the job, the benefits that go on with the job, the conditions of the housing situation, and on and on and on. Whole agencies of the government, as well as private institutions like banks, insurance companies, think tanks, and so on, assess all of these data. So what's going into the great economy? Well, let me tell you. The number one statistic, the thermometer under the tongue, is the unemployment rate, which is at a 30, 40-year low. That is good news. It's better that people have jobs than that they don't. It's better that your temperature is 98.6 than if it were 102. That's clear. But that's not enough. Suppose we knew that just before you had your temperature taken, you had been swirling around an iced drink in your mouth. We might be a little bit more concerned. Suppose we knew that you had acute pain. Then the fact that you have 98.6 would never be the end of the conversation. Suppose I could continue with the metaphor, but let's get to the economics. How and why is the American economy today not great? Let's see. We just announced a $1 trillion deficit. That means the government's deficit, the amount of money it spends over and above the taxes it takes in, has gotten markedly worse under Mr. Trump's government than it was before, and it wasn't good before, as Mr. Trump himself liked to say. Where's that in the great economy? Answer, we're not supposed to talk about it. You are not supposed to have it in your mind when you listen to the bloviating statements about a great economy. Why do we have such a horrific deficit, adding to the government's enormous debts? A problem for our children for decades to come. The number one reason? The tax cut of December 2017, a Trump government act that cut taxes on rich people and corporations, cutting the amount of taxes coming into the government. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump, in order to get the support of those parts of the country that like it, gave even more money to the military than they originally asked for. Well, it doesn't take a genius to understand if you cut the taxes coming in, which Trump did, and you increase the money going to the military, which Trump did, you're going to have a deficit unless you savage all of the rest of the governmental budget. You know, hospitals, roads, student loans, all of that. So we have a terrible deficit, and that's an issue. Here's another issue that has gotten worse under Trump. The level of government debt, plus the level of corporate debt, plus the level of private debt have all gotten worse. And they weren't good to begin with. Here's another one that ties into the debt. Capitalism, the system we live under, has an economic downturn every 4 to 7 years on average for 300 years. Everything that has been tried to prevent that from happening has failed. It's an average, so sometimes the distance between one crash and the next one is less than 4 to 7 years, and sometimes it has been more. The fact that it's currently a bit more proves nothing. The argument that we are not going to have a downturn in the near future is on the burden of those who believe it to prove, since history in every capitalist country so far tells us it's coming. But here's the problem. If we're overdue, that's part of the assessment. And if we're overdue at a time when there are record debts, so that the failure of this company or of this region will ramify through the network of debts and obligations all over the economy, we are in serious trouble, which any evaluation of our economy should make clear. Then there's the fact that, yes, we have low unemployment, but here's a problem. We have low unemployment in large part because we have shifted our labor force from one kind of job to another. That's part of the evaluation. And let me tell you what the shift looks like. We have lost jobs that are well paid, have good benefits, are secure. You got it? Well paid, benefits, security. And we've cut those and replaced them with jobs that have low pay, fewer or no benefits, and fewer or less in the way of security. That has to be assessed. That's not a great economy. In November of last year, the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C., released a report with a stunning conclusion. 44% of our workers here in the United States earn $20,000 or less per year. Wow. That means these people are, if not the poor, they're really close. And we're talking about almost half the population. That's one of the results of moving jobs from high pay, big benefits, secure, to the opposite. That's part of an assessment by anyone who isn't a hustler or a misleader on purpose. I could go on. I could give you other statistics. 1.5 million children last year in the American school system were homeless and therefore falling behind. 10% in the city of New York alone of school children enrolled in schools didn't have a home. What kind of a country treats its people that way? What kind of a country now criminalizes the homeless? You have homeless if an economy doesn't work, if it can't put together an affordable home and someone with enough income to afford it. If you don't do that, that's a failure of your economy. We have homelessness on a scale we haven't seen for a quarter century. Thank you, Mr. Trump and the GOP. We don't have a great economy unless you listen to the people who tell you that. And we can forgive Mr. Trump and the GOP. Maybe we know what they're about. They're getting reelected. But when liberals and the mass media and the Democratic Party establishment are also silent in the face of claims of a great economy, you have to scratch your head. Is it that they are just too afraid to question, to criticize the capitalist system for all the old Cold War reasons? Are they afraid of offending their rich donors who are the businesses whose system is failing? If so, you can understand why Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren has such troubles. They're running against make-believe. Let me conclude with a famous story that was a joke in Germany for the last 50 years. Two Germans during the Hitler time are sitting on the bank of the Rhine River, and they're discussing the economy. And the first one says to the other, "Isn't it wonderful how the Führer, Adolf Hitler, is making our economy hum? It's a great economy." The other one says, "Hans, look at the river we're watching as we have our lunch. There are no barges going up and down. You and I both know that when the economy's in good shape, we see barges going up and down the river." His companion grins at him and says, "Oh, no, no, no. You don't learn about the economy by watching what's actually happening on the river. What you do is read the Führer's newspaper." That's where we are. Next time you hear about the great economy, remember the joke.